it seems that he got most of the facts right, but some things I'm a little uncertain about. Later on, you all heard about that audition where they were searching for a backing group for Billy Fury. This was the manager Laurie Palmer, and he was renaming all his stars, and they all have to have such names. Billy Fury, Marty Wilde, Georgie Fame, and the Beatles ended up with playing backing on a lousy tour to Scotland for a guy called Johnny Gentle. There is it in the Anthology, there is this snip of an interview with Paul McCartney where he said that compared to Wild and Fury, Gentle sounded a little lame. There's one thing about that audition. I'm not sure. When you're reading so many books about the same subject, sometimes you don't recall what was in what book, but I think it's here. And I think it's actually the only source that stated that. And that's why I think, okay, is this a good story or is it actually true? But the story goes that at the audition, John Lennon came up to Billy Fury and asked for his autograph. So the story goes. And this is also an important thing to mention. Billy Fury was from Liverpool. So even if he was playing in another style than what you know as Mersey Beat, you could say he was some kind of very early Mersey Beat. Well, if that's how you want to look at it, and saying, okay, artists from Liverpool. I may say a little bit more about that later. But just remember this, and as I said, I would say a little bit more later. Well, that's about the books and the most obvious CDs. Of course, I guess you all know, you must do, this wonderful film, movie, whatever you want to call it, Nowhere Boy. I saw it in the cinema theater and I couldn't wait for the DVD to come. It's such a fantastic film. It's not historical correct but when you look at it, you just don't care. I saw it with a good friend of mine that is also a big Beatles enthusiast, and well, we could have sitting down and made a list and said, oh, whoop, 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 that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Before we have watched 2 minutes, maybe the first minute actually of the film, we forgot all about that and we were simply experiencing. And it was so fantastic sitting there, and so fantastic because, it's kind of all those exact facts and, oh, that's bending it a bit. Oh, now they're bending it a bit. That's on a very rational, intellectual level. But that film sort of touches you so much and goes so deep down in your feelings and, touching you on an emotional level. And it's really like you are living with John Lennon in Liverpool in the late 50s. So it doesn't really matter. It is so fantastic. You really got that feeling that You are living with John Lennon in the late 50s in Liverpool, and you are together with him and going through all those things with him, and it's so fantastic. It's really, and you are so touched, and you are laughing, you are crying, you are, even though there's a lot of bending the facts. If you haven't seen it, you should. You really should. Those of you who have know, of course, about this, a bit of bending the facts here and there. Let me mention some few examples. In the beginning of the film, John is given a mouth organ. Do you call it that? Or harmonica, or, by his Uncle George. Well, he got that gift, but that was much earlier on. He got it when he was 10 years old, and at this point he's a young man. He's definitely more than 10 years old. Shortly after Uncle George dies, that's true, but in the film they made it like, that very kind man who was not as strict as his wife, that was Mimi, that he loses him and is in a existential vacuum, and that may make him look for his mother. That's not true. He was in contact with Julia when Uncle George dies. So no, that's not how it was. Another example, well, that you all know that famous story about John Lennon smashing the washboard into the head of Pete Shotton. They have used that in the film, but at a wrong occasion. They have made it like it's a birthday party. Julia is having for John, and it's there, it happened. And if any of you haven't seen the film, you might sit now and think, well, that's blasphemy. You can't do that. You can't fuck about with such an important incident. Because those of you who say that, of course, it was not at that occasion it happened. But again, I tell you, when you see the film, you really don't care. It doesn't matter. Well, and a last thing I will mention, well, of course, the most important of all the incidents, John meeting Paul. There are several eyewitnesses to the occasion, and they all agreed that Paul and John didn't shake hands. They do that in the film, but it doesn't matter. I showed you this book, The Day John Met Paul. The way he tells the story, he says they didn't shake hands, but they were both taken by the hand by fate. And that's how it is. It is such a big and important thing. It is the moment. But they didn't know that back then. They didn't know they were writing history. They didn't know I am standing here and this is the moment. And the story of the history of music is filled with anecdotes of people who had to travel very, very far to find like-minded people. Chopin came from Poland and traveled all the way to France, Paris, and there are all sorts of story, and here those two, the biggest songwriters in the history of pop and rock, growing up in the same city, and now they are meeting each other. This is the moment. But the way they does it in the film, you know, on a more metaphorical level, it covers that, telling the same story, because it's very casual. It's like, okay, I'm John, yeah, I'm Paul, you know, and it's so casual. It's just two teenagers saying hi to you. Well, and a really short handshake, and that's what makes it so great. Because you are sitting there watching the movie, and you know this is the moment, and you are saying, "Oh, that's so great! Oh yeah." And they didn't know, so they are so casual, and I don't care about it, you know. And that's what makes it so great. And it is really well done, even though it's not the how it exactly was, and that this handshake is incorrect. It doesn't matter. On a more symbolic, metaphorical level, it tells the same story as when Jim O'Donnell says they didn't shake hands, but they were both taken by the hand by faith. You know, it's this feeling of meant to be, you know, and oh, it's so great. And you know, there are it's really it really kind of brings back the magic, making the magic, and as a viewer to the movie, you become a part of the magic. You know, that magic. You in the an anthology series, you remember that scene. Is it In Spite of All the Dangers they are playing there, or another one of those early recordings? I'm not sure, but while that music is playing, there is this scene. You are going down the stairs into a room in a cellar, and there stands this tape recorder, and the tape runs out and going the last snippet of the tape going there. You know, that I remember the first time I saw it, and I was because there is this, you know, the music is played with a lot of reverb, echo or something that makes you feel like it's far away, and you're going down these stairs, and it's like you are diving into history, and you are going deeper, and there you find it, that tape recorder. Here it is. Here you got the exhibit, the proof, or whatever you might call it, and it's so great. But sorry, I kind of lost my way and got far out here. So let me cut it here and go further about materials of sources to the subject. One thing I will say, there is a quite good video here on YouTube where a guy is reviewing Nowhere Boy, and goes a little bit more into detail with that film. You know, I mentioned a few details about it, but he goes a bit more into detail. It's a whole video about that film, more or less. I think he is talking about several films, but he's doing a great job on Nowhere Boy. One thing that struck me about that video was that he said that in spite of all the dangers, didn't make much of an impact on him when he first saw it saw or heard it on the Anthology, and I was, what? I think, what? From the first time I heard it, I was so, wow. And it was also this, surprising thing about it, that for so many years I have thought, well, the earliest thing there is was this session with Tony Sheridan in 61. And that's it. That's how far as you can go back. And there is this recording. There are two recordings. There are without Tony Sheridan. There are Inchy Sweet and Cry for a Shadow. Cry for a Shadow, a composition by John Lennon and George Harrison. So it's kind of their own material. Inchy Sweet is not. It's an old jazz standard, actually. I think it's back from the 20s, actually, the original version. But, it's John Lennon singing and sort of, so it's like, okay. And most of those compilations with the Sheridan sessions begins with Inchy Sweet. That's the opening track. So it's sort of, okay. It all began with Inchy Sweet, and then slowly things started to change, and the acid were coming in, and things got very experimental, and well, and at the other side you got This Is the End, and there you got it, a complete work from A to Z, a travel through about everything in music. It's like all has been said. Well, I thought that for many years. But suddenly there was this recording from several years before with this really young John, Paul and George singing together, and yes, I know it's primitive and inferior and all that, but I think it's a good tune, and I actually think at this very early point it shows something about Beatles and Beatles making music. There is this little part, I showed you this Quarrymen CDs. They have a version of In Spite of All the Dangers without the and it all falls to pieces. This little snip of choir is so essential to that tune, and it's what really does the job. And you got something there that can be compared to later on. There are so many Beatles songs where they are just a little thing, and that just sort of, it may be a good song, and it could be a good song without it, but it makes it so much better. And I know all of you who are Beatles fans, you can mention so many examples of it, so I won't begin here to say a lot about that, because you all know it. You all heard all these fantastic songs, and there are all these fine little details that making it so much better.